Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, joined by draft professor Anthony Russo. And before we get going, I want to remind everybody that light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak. But we are going to be going through just some different news that's in the draft community right now. But Anthony, before we get started, we've got 2 more days at NFL games, and then about 18 teams are moving on to 2026. So, what are your immediate thoughts of kind of where we are in the draft cycle and what's going on in the NFL world right now?
Yeah, I mean, first, obviously, happy to be back, happy to be here, happy to talk some draft news with you. Um, yeah, I mean, this is obviously a busy time. You said it, the season ends this weekend. Black Monday will be, I don't know if busy is necessarily the right word, but news making and intriguing, I think, would be fair to say. Transfer portal obviously opening up this week, and we've already seen quite a few guys being linked to some other schools. Some guys deciding to go, making the decision to go back to school. Some guys obviously declaring as well. So some big names on that front. And obviously Senior Bowl is a couple weeks out, end of the month. Guys are getting their invites, accepting their invites to and the Shrine Bowl, I should say, as well. So a lot of activity on that front as well. And college football playoff has already, I think, shaken up draft boards and the outlook for quite a few big name prospects. So it is busy. We are definitely not short on topics and things to talk about, which is great. And if you are a fan of one of the 18 teams that will not be partaking in the playoffs, coming soon, this is as good a time as any to start getting your NFL draft fill, because it is filling up for sure.
Yeah, so a lot of announcements about players or whether or not they're returning to school or entering the draft. Let's talk about some of this. So I think the biggest surprise for me was Josiah Trotter of Missouri, a redshirt sophomore, declaring. Um, I was really just more surprised that a redshirt sophomore linebacker declared. But then as I thought about it, I know who his father is, so I'm sure he's getting some pretty good advice. Um, what did you think of the Trotter declaration?
Yeah, I kind of along the lines of your thought process. I would say not only is he a redshirt sophomore, which in and of itself is a sort of surprising thing, but I think there's a pretty unanimous, or at least majority, feeling that this linebacker class is one of the most talented in recent years. Obviously the guys at the top, like the Arvell Reeses of the world and the Sonny Styles and the CJ Allen. But then you even dive into the day two names, the Anthony Hills and the Jake Golddays, and those kinds of guys. So Trotter's going to have competition to be a linebacker taken off the board early. That said, in terms of his skill set, and in terms of his play this year, I have to believe that he was getting day two grades from the NFL and the scouts that gives those grades. For those that don't understand the process, if you're a prospect who's draft eligible, you can ask the NFL to basically give you a grade of what they project your draft stock will be, and they will tell you you're a round one player, you're a round two player, or they'll tell you return to school. That those are the only possible grades that you will get from the NFL. There's no round five grade or anything like that. So I would be under the impression that Josiah was told, a round two grade, and I think that's what I would probably tell him too. Um, so I understand the decision from a talent perspective and from a skill set perspective. You mentioned his father as well, the great Eagles linebacker Jeremiah Trotter. His brother is also in the league as well, a former draft pick. So he is getting good advice. I have to believe, and I don't question him declaring from again from a talent perspective, but it is surprising that a redshirt sophomore linebacker is declaring, but I still expect him to be a top 50 to 75 kind of player.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to think of some of the other declarations. I don't have a list in front of me, but Keegan Trost was another one. I believe offensive tackle from Missouri, correct?
Yeah, yeah, he plays tackle
Yeah,
for them now. Probably kicks inside at the NFL level, but yeah, he's the
yeah.
tackle for Missouri.
And I'll even put Cage Casey in the
Hmm.
same category, right?
Yeah.
Because these were offensive linemen who graded mid, right? And what I mean by that is I don't know well with Casey, I may have heard second round. I think at least one draft professor said they could see him going in round two.
Hmm.
But generally speaking, when I say mid, they're like round 3, 4, right? They're like somewhere between player 75 and 125 on the board. Um, and that's kind of where I feel like Casey would go and Trost would go, but they're declaring. So, what are your thoughts on Trost, Casey, and maybe some of the other, let's say, mid players that have declared?
Yeah, I know Casey. I'm trying to remember who it was, but yeah, I know Casey has fans. I think Dom. I remember him saying I think he's a big Cage Casey guy. Um, I would probably be closer to you and say like early to mid day three kind of guy, and the same probably goes for Trost as well. Um, I do think it sort of speaks to you know for all the declarations that you're talking about, there's also been several return to school offensive linemen. I think of Lalulu, the Oregon
Yeah,
center. He's going back to school. Um, I believe uh, Georgia's no, was it Georgia's tackle? Somebody else's offensive tackle also said they Caden Green, Missouri. That's who it
yes.
was. Caden
The
Green is
other
going back
Missouri,
to
yeah, the
school.
other Missouri
Yes,
offensive lineman.
right. Um, he's going back to school. So I think it's this offensive line class is not great in my opinion. I think there's good players, but overall it's not that impressive. Um, so it feels like it's a sort of a calculated risk from Casey and Trost and these other guys that maybe we wouldn't necessarily give the highest grades. But if Cage Casey goes to, I'm not sure if he was a Senior Bowl guy or a Shrine Bowl guy or what have you, but whatever All Star game he likely winds up at, if he performs well in a sort of limited field of offensive line talent to have to compete against, I think that's the logic, and then yeah, he probably does wind up being a day two pick because of that. Um, so we'll see what happens, and all these guys are going to go through the process, and we'll see the end results here. But I can understand. I understand the offensive line declaring the declarations more, just because I do think you could take advantage of a not so strong offensive line group as a whole.
And
And to Ryan's point, yeah,
so
I was just
I was gonna build on what you said. So I think the draft isn't a shiny draft. This isn't gonna be a draft where you're really going to go after your fantasy football players, right? Not the
Yeah.
best running back class. The wide receiver class does have some marquee to it.
Hmm.
But the reason why I say that is that I don't know if people are seeing this class as strong as others. I think I don't want to put words in a draft professor's mouth, but a frequent podcaster with us said he doesn't have a lot of day two grades. Or doesn't have a lot of round two grades.
Yeah.
So the normal amount of first round grades, but the drop off to round two seems steep. So if that happens, and you're one of these guys that like I described as mid, like a Casey or a Trust, that actually works to your benefit because they're also entering the draft a year younger. The draft likes young players. You're more likely to be drafted when you're 21 than you are when you're 23.
Yeah. Well, and that's that's sort of the conversation around the Akeem Mesidors of the world who are going to be 25 on draft day. Um, that's basically the big knock with him because everything else you watch the tape, you watch him play, great player, but he's he's going to be a 25-year-old rookie, which already limits him. Now, I my personal belief is age is a very overblown issue to have with prospects as a whole. Um, to Ryan's comment about Freeling and Gooseby, um, I think they're both. If they both were to declare, I think they are. I think they would get top 50 grades from me. Um, Gooseby probably a little higher, maybe like fringe round one grade, kind of conversation. Um, but I think if they both declared, they could both be first rounders because of the development arc, the young age that you're talking about, um, and the tools are there for both of them. I think they both have noticeable weaknesses, but they would be very sought after because one, the tackle class isn't great, and two, they fit that sort of younger guy that we can coach up, and we don't have to. He has the tools you can't teach, but clean up the technique and clean up the footwork and things like that, and they can be really good NFL pros. So, it'll be really
Yeah.
interesting to see if guys like Gooseby and Freeling declare too, because I think there's merit in both, whether they declare or stay in school. I think you can make an argument either way. Um, but in terms of just this year and this draft and this tackle class specifically, I agree with Ryan. The class very much could use at least one of them, but
Yeah.
ideally both of them.
So Ryan, I'm gonna burst your bubble. I don't think Gooseby declares.
I don't think
So
so either.
I'm looking at the depth chart. So according to the article that I am reading right now, Texas played. Did they play today?
No, they played New Year's Eve against Michigan.
Okay, so the date of the article is December 31st. I thought I saw that Texas was playing today. But in Texas's bowl game, Wisner wasn't there, Baxter wasn't there,
Yeah, they're both
DeAndre Moore
transferring.
wasn't there
He's
because all of
transferring.
them entered the transfer portal. So because they
Yep.
entered the portal, they chose not to play for Texas in the
Mm-hmm.
bowl game. In
Yep.
addition to that, Anthony Hill, Michael Taft, Malik Muhammad, Jalen Guilbeau sat out, as did Ethan Burke and Trey Moore. If
Yeah,
Gooseby
they're
was
all
in the
declaring.
draft, he was planning to declare, I think he would have sat out just like those other players. So um,
Yeah.
that's my theory, but everybody is welcome to disagree with me. But I think Gooseby, the fact that he hasn't announced, tells me he's going back. But in addition to that, no matter what the discourse is, we should know January 6th, right? Which is, I believe, Tuesday is the deadline to
Mm-hmm.
declare for the draft if your team isn't in a bowl game. right, Anthony?
Correct. Yeah, if your team's not in the playoff, yeah. Because I think all the bowl games will have wrapped by the 6th. Um,
Yep.
but yes, yeah, you have the 6th is the deadline for the for to declare for the draft. So we will have answers on a lot of notable guys. I mean, obviously now Ohio State's out, so that's going to be quite a few names to watch from their roster for who declares and who stays and who would potentially transfer. I don't know. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of good. Yeah, there's a lot of talented teams. That's kind of the one thing about this playoff too. Like Alabama's another one. Like there's a lot of talented football players that could potentially declare or potentially transfer or potentially just stay at school that are now out of the playoff, and so now we're gonna speed up their decision process to declare or not. So it'll be interesting to see. Like Georgia, obviously now out too. So that kind of makes it a little more intriguing in that regard. And you almost wonder too. I think the Ty Simpson thing is a fascinating the discussion and analysis of a guy who at one point this season people believed was QB1 material. I think that ship might have sailed a bit, but he's not. I don't think he's going back to Alabama. Uh, Brian, it does feel like that. Honestly, I don't know how far off that is. But yeah, the transfer portals. We could do a whole podcast on
Well,
the craziness of the transfer portal, but yeah, a lot of interesting names to watch. Is the focal point of
so
what I was saying.
I think it will be a busier portal than, let's say, last year. But one of the reasons for that is, if I remember the number correctly, I believe there are 36 coaching changes at Power Four schools. Does that number sound right to you, Anthony?
It sounds right. I mean, I could. Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but if you told me it was 36, I
Yep.
believe that.
So, my opinion is when a player commits to a school, they're partially committing to the coach, meaning that you're trusting that that coach is going to help you raise your game so that you can do more football things in life, right? So, whether that's move on to the NFL or just become a better player, what I mean is the player is buying into the coach at some point. So, if the coach leaves, I think that's a really good reason for a player to leave. I remembered like there was a player at Michigan State. Once they saw who like the new offensive line coach was, they left. Right, like they didn't want to be coached by that specific person, or they knew that their body type didn't fit that person's preferred blocking scheme. So, as a player, you have to know what type of coach you want to play for, and I think that makes a lot of sense in the to use the portal to get you to a place. And I think the other thing that's important, and we've said it on this podcast before, if you believe that you are a good college football player, you need to be getting playing time when you're a sophomore. And if you're not, you need to transfer somewhere that's going to give you playing time. That to me, that is absolutely critical to how we do draft evaluations. Because one of the other things, Anthony, that we wanted to talk about was like, how does a really good game in a college football playoff impact a player's draft stock? Like, in your opinion, like, how would you answer that?
I mean, I can't speak for everyone. For me personally, I value what a player does, any player, what they do in the biggest moments, in the biggest, in the biggest situations, and the biggest games, and the toughest opponents, and all that. I value that not astronomically more than all the other games of the season, but certainly I think to a higher degree than the other regular season games, even the regular season games that are the marquee matchups and the big the top 10 matchups and all that. Like those are obviously important, but I think there's a when you're in a playoff atmosphere or even like the conference championships, like that, you being able to elevate your game and to elevate what you bring to the table is a something that I think translates to the NFL. To be able to, if you're going to be on a team that's trying to make a playoff push, you got to be able to block out the noise and block out the pressure and go out there and make plays and perform at the highest level. That's why, as an example, this Miami Ohio State game, I was one of the people that, and I, people that follow me know I've loved Ruben Bain since the summer, and I had him as a number one player, all that, whatever. When the 30-inch arm thing came out, I was nervous, and I got a little, I had some trepidation, and I said, all right, maybe he's not going to be as high on my board as I would want him to be, because he's a historical outlier, and that's a problem, to when you're trying to play in the NFL. And then he went out against, granted, Ohio State's offensive line is not anything to write home about, but it's still Ohio State. It's still a playoff game against the number 2 team in college football. And Ruben Bain went out there and just took over. He was the best player, or one of the 3 best players on the field in that game, at least. And now, arm length be damned. Unless he gets absolutely just stonewalled when they play, who they play next? Indiana? No, Ole Miss. When they play Ole Miss, if Ruben Bain gets completely, washed out and does nothing, then we can have a conversation. But assuming he plays to that level again, top 10 player. I don't care about the arm length. I'm just the dude is putting up his best play against the best competition, as he did earlier in the year when they played Notre Dame and they ran through the ACC mostly. He was lights out, and I think there is tremendous value to the best players playing their best football in the biggest moments of the season.
So, and I like leading that example off with Ruben Bain because, there was a lot of discourse. Some people at Draft Professors are calling it prospect fatigue because we've been talking about Ruben Bain we've been talking about him, I think, since May.
Right. I have.
Yep. And we're not alone, right? Every draft podcast has been talking about Ruben Bain.
Yep.
So that's a really good example on the positive case of the college football playoff has probably raised or kept Bain high. Yesterday, Harrison Wallace had a career day. I don't have the exact stat line, but he was already at like 147 yards and 2 touchdowns before the game was even over. And the announcers kept repeating that he's having a career day. And then we're in the Draft Professor group chat, and his grade is late day 3. Right. His grade was either day 3 or late day 3. Those were the responses. So does a game like yesterday change the draft stock of Harrison Wallace, the wide receiver from Ole Miss?
Well, I think, my opinion aside, I think the answer kind of has to be yes, because I don't know if you saw, he just so happened to get an accepted Senior Bowl invite yesterday. After I just looked it up, 9 catches, 156 yards, and a touchdown. By the way, also, teammate DeJon Stribling had 7 catches for 122 yards. So both Ole Miss wide receivers that I would say were discussed as being day 3 guys, I think put on a really good performance yesterday. But all that to say, I'm again, I don't think one game, no matter how important it is going to just, negate the entire season of what we've seen from this player. And I even, in the group chat when you asked about Harrison, I made the example of I don't, I remember watching him at Penn State the year prior, and I wasn't particularly moved by him then. And then this year, I wasn't particularly moved when I hadn't done a full eval of him
Yeah.
after the season. But, the times I had seen Ole Miss didn't really jump off the screen in any way. Um, so I don't think like, oh, wow, he had one awesome game, and it was, but that doesn't just mean, okay, well, we can just, get rid of all the other 2 years worth of, film and analysis and all that, and we just don't, we're not going to acknowledge it because he played great in this one game against a kind of overrated Georgia defense. But what it does do is obviously it gives him this Senior Bowl invite, which I don't think is a coincidence that he got. Um, and so now, and if he continues to excel, if Ole Miss wins this next game and is competitive in the national championship, and Harrison Wallace is putting up more 100 yards and a touchdown performances or whatever, you kind of have to take note of that, and that has to, elevate his stock at least somewhat. So and then you go to the Senior Bowl, and if he does well at the Senior Bowl, that can help his stock too. So if you're somebody like Harrison Wallace, who I think is pretty universally would have been a day 3 guy for a lot of people, you go out and you make these big performances, and then you improve as the draft circuit goes along and all that. Absolutely, I think his draft stock can change. I'm just not gonna like declare that he's all of a sudden this amazing player after just one big game.
Yep. So anybody else in the college football playoff where you saw what their performance was against a, let's say, higher quality competition, and it made you either double check your evaluation or modify your evaluation?
Um, I'm trying to think of who would have. I'm trying to think if anybody would have changed. Well, I think the obvious one is probably Trinidad Chambliss, and I don't think it necessarily like drastically changed. I think I was a little higher on Trinidad than most people. But that kind of performance, again, I still think Georgia is a little bit of an overrated defense, but I would also say that was one of the best playoff quarterback performances in recent years, at least, if not in the entire history of the playoff. And for a guy who I also find it funny that Trinidad loses his amazing head coach in Lane Kiffin and just so happens to play the best game of his career. That's a little funny to me too. But he looked, it was everything you could ever want in terms of the confidence, the athleticism, the ability to not just make plays outside the pocket, make unbelievable, ridiculous plays outside the pocket. But even in the pocket, still operating the offense and still being able to diagnose and read coverages and get to his second and third reads and make those throws. Like it was a master class, not just in terms of like being this hero ball amazing play guy, but also like actually playing the quarterback position. Which I don't think I think we had seen it a bit during the season, but not obviously to that level and to that, kind of just insane performance against, a school like Georgia and given those stakes. We will see how he fares against I think better defense in Miami and a pass rush that has, I mean, I just talked about how they decimated Ohio State on the line of scrimmage. We'll see how Ole Miss can try to get an answer. But if Trinidad does anything close to that again against Miami, and then whether or not he declares, if he decides to declare after that, I mean, you gotta believe that first round is at least, in at least a conversation to be had. Again, also given just the state of the quarterback class at this point. But I don't think before yesterday anyone, even myself, would have said Trinidad is even sniffing first round. But that's what the playoff can do, and again, if he builds on it, I don't think that's out of the question.
So, do you think Michael Penix was a first round pick in part because of his performance in the college football playoffs?
I certainly think that. Yeah, yes, because I think if he, I don't think if he doesn't take Washington to the national championship, I don't know if there's as much,
Yep.
excitement, and I remember too, like, the tape that he put out against, was it Texas in the semifinal? Like, that was one of the games that made me say, "Oh, he's a first round pick." And I was, I still am a Michael Penix truther. But I remember the Texas game being oh, this dude's legit kind of game for me. And I would imagine that some other scouts and NFL personnel people felt the same way. So, could he in theory have been a first round pick without it? Sure. But I think that cemented him being a first round pick.
So, I think another player in a loss, which helped his draft stock, was Lee Hunter, the defensive tackle from Texas Tech.
Yep.
So, Oregon, I don't know what the polite word to use. Will I just say dominated Texas Tech?
Yep.
I'm not going to try to be superfluous or add in some clever adjectives. But specifically, everybody's talking about the edges, David Bailey, Romello Height for Texas Tech. But Oregon was able to neutralize those two edges. But you could see that Lee Hunter was having an impact in the middle. And that's against Emmanuel Pregnon, which some draft professors have as interior offensive lineman 1, first round grade. Iapani Lululu, who you had mentioned earlier in the podcast, Jerry and Owen had a first round grade on him, and he chose to return to school.
As did I. Yeah.
Yeah, so Lee Hunter's holding up against two very high quality offensive linemen that we have a lot of respect for. I think Lee Hunter got himself solidly in day 2.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I was a Lee Hunter guy, before the game. He was a borderline top 50 guy for me, over the past few weeks. But I agree with you. I think I think David Bailey was the best player for Texas Tech, just so incredibly explosive and dominant. But like, if David Bailey was 1A, Lee Hunter's probably like 1C. Like, it was like he was just as impactful, because you said it, basically just neutralizing the middle of the offensive line, handling his business against Pregnon, and Lululu, and their right guard whose name escapes me right now. But he completely just owned the middle of the defensive line, and made it really hard for Oregon to run the football. And I think really they only were able to run the football because it just got to a point where Texas Tech's offense was so anemic that, it was just, it was only a matter of time, given how much Texas Tech's defense would have been on the field. But But all that to say, yes, I would not be surprised in the slightest if Lee Hunter is a top 50 player. I probably would even say, I think first round, another guy that I would say first round is on the table. And with it's a little tougher with the defensive tackle slash nose tackle kind of guys. And also it's tougher because there is a really good group of defensive tackles this year. Caden McDonald at Ohio State, who played well in a loss as well against Miami. You talk about Amari Washington, who was in that game with Texas Tech as well. Kristen Miller at Georgia, Big Citrus. Like there's these, there's a list of really good defensive tackle prospects. I do think Lee Hunter is separating himself to where, I'm not going to say definitively. I'm going to want to go back and I'm going to want to see how the playoffs end, and then I'll go back and kind of evaluate all of it. If Lee Hunter winds up as my DT2 behind Peter Woods, I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's that talented of a just specimen of a player.
Okay, so we have maybe a few other things we were going to go over. So, what anybody that's going to catch your eye in the next round of the college football playoffs, where you see a matchup of maybe a player that you're not sure of their grade, or they could, if they win their matchup, you think they might move up a tier on your board?
I would say I think there's a very reasonable world where the Ole Miss tackles, Diego Pounds and Jaden Williams, if they remotely not even stop, if they just kind of pump the brakes a little bit on the Bane Mesidor, deadly combination that they are, I think they will put people on notice, because literally nobody has really been able to stop the duo consistently this year. So there's a chance for them really to elevate their stock. Am I necessarily saying they're going to? No, but that chance is there. I'd be interested to see how Indiana's receivers handle Oregon's secondary. Brandon Finney was making a lot of plays, and I know he's not draft eligible. He's a freshman for the Ducks, but Brandon Finney was a difference maker for that Ducks defense. Dylan Thieneman, who I was a really big fan of over the summer, the Ducks safety. He was also making plays in that Texas Tech game. Indiana's receivers were, and have been very good this season. I don't think they were particularly tested as much. So I'd be curious to see if Oregon's secondary could slow them down and just slow down Indiana's offense as a whole, potentially learn from their mistakes in the previous matchup. And I know Omar Cooper and Surratt are both kind of getting day 2 grades right now. We'll see if that, if they struggle against Oregon, maybe that could bump them sort of to the later side of day 2. If they go out there and own the Oregon secondary, maybe that elevates them to firmly top 50 guys. That could be interesting as well. And obviously you're getting the Mendoza versus Moore, the sequel matchup, that I know they don't go against each other, obviously, and neither of them are playing defense, but this is what This is what I'm talking about when I say that the big players make the big plays in the big moments. You are, for both of them, you're a top two caliber quarterback going against the other top two quarterback in this class, assuming they both declare, and you know every NFL scout and GM and coach is going to be everyone that has a high draft pick is going to be watching this game very closely to see how you play. And you are going to have a chance to go to the national championship if you play well. Um, so this game, fairly or not, oh, did I lose Jim? It was a good run. Well, yeah, big game for them. That's the long and short of my thing. Jam, you back?
I should be. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot see
There we
you,
go.
but
So I was trying. I think I got hit with malware. My search engine was Yahoo. So I hit a
nice.
button to take Yahoo off, and it disabled me from the. It disabled my camera. I heard you the
Oh,
entire time, but
great, cool.
no, it wasn't the issue
Oh,
that
you're back.
happened like 6 months ago. Because I remember
Yeah,
remember that.
I was prepared.
So
I was preparing mentally to start filibustering, but I'm glad
yeah,
you saved us.
okay. And then you want to do some Black Monday predictions? Let's go division by division.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So we have Buffalo, Miami, the Jets, and the Patriots. Any
Oh god.
coaching changes?
I No, I don't think so. As much as my every fiber of me wants the Jets to be a yes, but it's not going to happen. It's just
You're
Woody's
not an
not.
Aaron Glenn. You're not an Aaron Glenn truther, are you?
No, I know the opposite. I'm out on Aaron Glenn, and I think he should be fired. But Woody's not. Woody's not going to do it. He's a he's not going to do it from a financial perspective, and B, I think he really likes Aaron Glenn and wants Aaron Glenn to work. So it's not going
Yeah.
to happen. But I would fire Aaron Glenn Monday if it was my choice. But
So the Dolphins fans that follow Draft Professor are telling me that McDaniel in Miami is safe. So I'm going to say AFC East, no. Okay, so
yeah,
AFC North, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Baltimore. Do you think all four teams could change coaches?
no, could yes. Will they? No. I think Tomlin's safe. Um, I guess maybe it's contingent on who wins the division. And maybe that will impact things. But I think either way, Tomlin's good. Harbaugh's probably good too. But I think if you ask me who of Tomlin or Harbaugh is more likely if one of them were to lose their job, probably I would say Harbaugh. Um, I think Taylor in Cincinnati's safe because Cincinnati just doesn't they just don't like making coaching changes, and they'll find a way to not blame Zach Taylor for Cincinnati's problems. Um, I don't think, and I'm going to word this a very specific way. I do not think Kevin Stefanski is going to be the Browns head coach next year. Do I necessarily believe that means he gets fired as the Browns head coach? Maybe not. I mean, it definitely could be. Um, but I think trade or mutual parting of ways is also very much a an outcome that we see on Monday because
So yeah, so for the Browns, I could be sold both ways. I could be sold
yeah,
that Stefanski stays. I could be sold that he should go. So first, selling that he should go. The Browns really haven't done anything under his tenure.
yeah,
Okay, like so, it's a results driven business. The results aren't there. Now, I could sell him staying. He's saddled with a Deshaun Watson contract. You should generally believe that he had conversations about moving on from Deshaun Watson, what that does to the salary cap. Would a new head coach want to come on with all of the dead cap the Browns would have moving on from Watson. If the Browns move on from a coach, I think it would be next year because they would be more appealing because they would have eaten all the dead cap, assuming they move on from Watson this offseason.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I guess to the argument for doing it now too is you have 2 first-round picks, and you have potentially, not in my opinion, but potentially a legitimate starting option in a 5th-round quarterback in Shador Sanders, and you have already, I mean, the best defensive player in football, Miles Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, a really solid defense. I think one of the things too that doesn't get talked about when we talk about this Stefanski, won't he get fired? Whatever. If he goes, Jim Schwartz goes, and if Jim Schwartz goes, I'm not saying necessarily the Browns defense is bad all of a sudden, but I do think Jim Schwartz is a big piece
Yes.
of the puzzle. So if you're Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry, is that worth losing Stefanski and trying to reset this whole thing? You know, knowing that you probably take a hit to your defense, which is kind of your calling card at this point. Now, to that point, the Browns defense, as good as it is, has gotten them, 3 wins this year? 4 wins this year? So, what does that really mean for you?
Yeah.
Um,
So
uh,
Jim Schwartz, like my favorite Jim Schwartz story is Buffalo really screwed up the Rex Ryan hire when he fired Jim Schwartz. So Buffalo had let go of their head coach, but they had retained Schwartz, and then when they hired Rex Ryan, Schwartz was fired.
mm-hmm.
Because that was a really good defense with Jerry Hughes and Marcel Darius and Kyle Williams, Mario
Yes.
Williams, and then Mario Williams, Jerry Hughes, Marcel Darius, Kyle Williams. That front four was incredible
Yep.
under Jim Schwartz the previous 2 or 3 seasons. Okay, so moving on then, AFC South,
Yep.
Jacksonville, Indianapolis. Oh, and I always forget all the teams in this division. Jacksonville, Indianapolis,
Houston and
Houston,
Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yeah.
We already know that Tennessee is going to hire a new coach. Do you
Yep.
think any of the other 3 teams in the AFC South change coach?
No, I guess the only one would be Indy, if there's another one. And they probably don't. I know the collapse is very ugly to look at. They've lost 7 in a row now. So like, rough ends of the season. Can you blame it all on Steichen? No, but I certainly think he has to shoulder some of the blame for what's happened. Um, I don't expect him to be fired though. Um, and obviously Houston and Jacksonville are both playoff teams that are above. They're doing great, so they have no reason to even think about that. Um,
I
I
didn't
was
have 2 AFC South teams making the playoffs on my bingo card this year.
I didn't either, and I didn't have Jacksonville. I guess Houston, sure, that makes sense, but like I wouldn't have said Jacksonville would have won the
Right.
division. Didn't peg that one for sure.
Okay. AFC West, Raiders, Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers. You think the Raiders move on from Pete Carroll?
Man, I I feel like I feel like they have to, because I just don't like what's the expectation if he stays? Like, we really think that this was just like a 1 year fluke, and Pete Carroll's actually going to come back next year and like win 10 games and be like competitive like all of a sudden. Like, he had like I know, like, it wasn't the greatest roster in the world. I don't think anyone expected the Raiders to like win the AFC West this year. Like that wasn't the goal. The goal was win 8, 9, maybe even 10 games and be competitive and start kind of laying the building blocks for a potential if you could start to think about like who takes over for Gino, and the defense would be pretty good with Pete Carroll, and you're starting to get some young players on offense like Brock Bowers can continue to be great, whatever. And like it just like nothing went well. Nothing. The defense was bad. The animosity and the disagreement between Spytek, the GM, and Carroll in terms of like playing the young players versus sticking with the older vets, like that was playing out literally before our eyes. Firing Chip Kelly as the play caller, like not even or like just past the halfway point in the year or whatever. The Ashton Genty seeming like a waste of a pick because nobody would block for him. Geno Smith playing some of his worst football of his career, and as a former Jet, that's really saying something. So like, there was nothing that I would take away from the Raiders season and be like, yeah, this is something to build on. Pete Carroll, he can right the ship. Does it absolutely suck that you're now gonna fire coaches back to back one and dones? Yeah, that's really rough, but I just don't think the alternative of sticking with Pete and hoping that a 70, whatever he is now, 72, 73-year-old coach is going to like, get it right next time. Like, and now like they're going to bring in, probably Fernando Mendoza with the first overall pick. And like, this is clearly like a rebuild. Let's get the youth movement in there. You have Genty and Bowers. Like you have good young players on this team. Now is probably also the time you consider moving on from Crosby if you're ever going to do it. But I can't. I don't think Raiders fans can stomach this kind of season again. And I don't see any reason why Pete Carroll doesn't just decide to like hang it up and call it a career. You got nothing else to prove, man. You won Super Bowls. Call it.
Pete Carroll is probably one of the 5 best football coaches, football minds of our lifetime. Maybe he's in the top 10, but he's up there, right? He's taken USC to national titles, coached the Patriots, coached the Seahawks to a couple of Super Bowls, including one Super Bowl win. And he was a Marshawn Lynch touchdown running away from having 2 wins, right? So this is a really good coach. I think he was hired to be the Raiders coach to reset a culture. If you're going to sell me that Carroll stays, it's because you're buying into the fact that he knows how to create a culture. So if the GM is in the way and there's a GM head coach battle, the GM usually wins that. The only thing that would make me say it could be Pete Carroll is that Tom Brady is part of the decision-making process. So I guess I could see that either way, but we just went through the whole AFC. We see 2 coaching changes. So let's flip over to the NFC. We have the Giants, the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. The Giants have already fired their coach. Do you think the Eagles move on and have a coaching change on Black Monday?
Probably not. They win the division.
Yeah,
they'll get a home playoff game. I don't see that happening. I guess maybe the other one you could maybe say the Commanders, but I think Dan Quinn gets levity after Jaden Daniels' injury and all that stuff. So I don't know. I don't see any other changes in the division. I don't know if you saw the list of candidates that the Giants reportedly are looking at. That Jordan Rannon, I think, or Rainin. Apologies.
I saw a list, but if I just see a random tweet and I wasn't familiar with the account until I see multiple people communicating it.
Yeah, so, he's a ESPN, like he's a credible reporter. Yeah,
Okay.
to each. Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how if he has the entire list of candidates or if it's just like a couple names that they're interested in or whatever. Um, funny enough, they have one of the names on the list was Antonio Pierce, which like,
That I saw.
what are we doing, man? I did we not just see what happened in Vegas literally last year?
Yeah, like in his record in Vegas, did he even have 20 wins? I think it was like 10 wins and like 30 losses.
Yeah,
Somewhere
well,
in
no,
there. It was
because
like
he
10 and
was only
27 or
there.
something.
Well, because he was only there for a year, and then he was an interim before that. Um,
It was twice as many losses as wins, and there weren't very many wins.
I'll tell you right now what his record is. I mean, I know, like obviously, like he's a former Giant, whatever, but like, yeah, so he was 5-4 as the interim in 23, and then his first full year he was 4-13. So he's total 9-17. So he's one loss away from having twice as many losses as wins.
Yep.
So it's like
Yep.
what the Giants are so annoying. Like
Okay.
like why?
So,
What are we doing?
so we'll flip then to the NFC North. We
Yeah.
have the Lions, the Packers, the Bears, and the Vikings. I don't see any of those teams changing coaches.
No, again, like I guess if there's one, it's the Vikings. I guess like if you're worried about how KOC has handled the whole, investing everything in JJ McCarthy and he looks like crap. Um, I guess, but I wouldn't bet on any of them
Well,
getting ousted.
so, so I have a general, let's say, head coach theory. The head coach has to be able to pick their quarterback. So if a new coach comes into Minnesota, are they changing quarterbacks? And the new head coach is going to want to say, I want to change quarterbacks. So to me, I think Kevin O'Connell's there one more year because JJ McCarthy is going to get one more year. But if McCarthy
Yeah.
doesn't work, oh, he's out.
It Yeah, if McCarthy doesn't work and they finish, well, I guess they're tied. They're tied for last in the North because the Lions are also 8-8. So,
Yep.
so if they, I don't know which North teams play each other this weekend. But if the Vikings finish last, if they finish last in the division this year, they go into next year, and the same thing happens with McCarthy, and he sucks, and they finish last or at least bottom half of the division and don't make the playoffs. I think that is a very that's a conversation that he might need to go because yeah, like
Very
this.
few, yeah, very few head coaches ever get to pick two quarterbacks. The
Yeah.
fact that, like, for the Bears, the coach that just left, the one that was in there before,
Eberflus, yeah.
yeah, he had three new quarterbacks, right? Because he had Trubisky, then he had Fields, and then he actually was the coach when they drafted Caleb Williams. That's historical because
Yeah.
that's not just he got to pick three quarterbacks; he got to pick three first round quarterbacks. The only coach to me that ever came close to that was Brian Billick. He
Mm-hmm.
was almost able to move on from Trent Dilfer, but it just didn't quite work out. Um, okay, so now going to the NFC South. So we have the Panthers, we have the Buccaneers, we have Panthers, Buccaneers, Falcons, and New
Saints.
Orleans.
Yeah.
So I hear that the Falcons may want a new coach. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I think this is the most interesting division. Um, I think the Falcons are probably the most likely to move on. Although, I I gotta tell you, if the Bucks lose, or if the Bucks lose and or they don't make the playoffs because there's some way where Carolina, like I think Carolina can lose but still win the division because then if Atlanta wins, I think they get the
Got
tiebreak
it.
or whatever it is. But either way, if the Bucks don't make the playoffs, I think Todd Bowles
Yep.
is gone. That's the sense I get from Tampa people, and that's also kind of just like
Yep.
the vibe around the Bucks right now. Like Todd Bowles is again as a former Jet, I have experience with this, but Todd Bowles Todd Bowles has sort of lost his luster, and the game management issues are starting to catch up, and the offense is really starting to struggle. Um, again, like I mean, I've seen this all before with him. So it does kind of feel like Tampa's gonna want to like reinvigorate themselves, especially considering they've lost two potential head coach candidates that were their former OCs,
Yep.
and one is the coach that's very possibly going to beat them for the division on Sunday, and the other one is winning the division in his first year in Jacksonville. So, if I'm the Bucks and I see that and I see what my team is, I'm pretty pissed off at Todd Bowles, and I strongly consider moving on. And for the Falcons, I think I think coaching is holding back this team so much, and I know
Yes.
like I'm not trying to be just like a Michael Penix Glazer, but I really think like if there was a different offensive coordinator there, things would be better. Maybe not like perfect. And Penix would still have problems, but man, I hate the coaching staff and like what they're doing in Atlanta. So, and I was never I always thought the Raheem Morris hire was questionable. I hate coaching retreads in general. Um, I just think like they don't work more often than they do. Um, but regardless, I won't be surprised if there's any division that has two coaching changes. It might be the NFC South.
Okay. So we've got Titans, Giants, possibly the Falcons, possibly the Buccaneers, possibly the Raiders. Those five. We still haven't done the NFC West, which would be the 49ers,
And the
the
Browns,
Rams.
right?
Oh, oh yeah, and maybe the
Browns,
Browns.
possibly
Yep.
Browns. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yep. And then, so if we go out to the NFC West, it's 49ers, Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are due for a coaching change.
I agree with you. I'm not convinced they do it. If it was my decision, they would.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think because you talked about it. Every coach gets to pick their quarterback. Jonathan Gannon has yet to pick his quarterback that he wants. He has been straddled with Kyler Murray since he got there. Now, do I think the teams and in particular the defenses should be better with him as the head coach? Yeah. Um I don't particularly love the job he's done overall, and it also just sucks that he is quite literally in a division with at least three of the best five head coaches in the NFL right now. Just all happen to be in his division. So, like, that's not fair. But that said, if we are going to subscribe to the theory of, you know, every coach should get their quarterback at least one, Gannon is due for that, and this feels like the offseason, regardless of whether Gannon is there or not. It feels like this is the offseason where Kyler Murray's gone, and the Cardinals will make a move to either draft a quarterback or begin the process of, bridging to
Yep.
2027. That's probably more likely, just because I don't think they're going to be in a position draft capital wise to get one of Moore or Mendoza. Um, but yeah, go ahead.
So do you remember when Kyler signed his extension? What, at this point it's been 3 years ago, I
Yeah,
think.
I was gonna say it was a 23 or 20. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
And then there was that clause that he had to watch a certain number of hours of game film to qualify for the bonuses.
yep,
Okay. And then they removed it, like it was announced, and then like the next day they removed that clause.
yep.
Don't you wish they had kept the clause, or don't you think that they wish they kept the clause in?
Well, yeah, but I don't even know. I don't even know how much that would have helped, honestly. But
Well, I think it may have helped some of the dead cap, right? Because
well,
that's
that's
really
true. Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
the issue with Kyler, right? Is they're about to grab a huge dead cap hit if they move on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's my thought if you look at Arizona. So I agree, every coach should pick his quarterback, but wow, like Gannon should have done something to hedge his bets last season to bring somebody in.
Yep.
Because if he didn't know last year he wanted to move on from Kyler, right, he should have known that last year. You need to bring somebody in because, my opinion, if you're Arizona, the selling point to keep Gannon is that don't saddle a new head coach with Gannon's dead cap.
Yeah.
So, meaning that you cut Kyler, you're going to have a whole bunch of dead cap. It's going to be tougher for Arizona to do some things in free agency the next season or two. Okay, make that the old coach's problem. But to me, that's a terrible. They did not manage the roster correct,
No.
right? Like it's almost like the Kyler Murray extension and the Daniel Jones extension. We should just have a podcast just to compare and contrast those two extensions. If you extend the wrong quarterback, it's going to cost the head coach's job.
Yeah, and that's why like I always like every time we have these conversations of like like Sam Darnold is like the new one where it's like he paid him what 30 million whatever I don't remember the exact number but he got like 30 million a year or whatever and it's like that's it's obviously it's worked out and he's playing very well but like he's not you could put I think you could put quite a few quarterbacks in that offense and in that on that roster as a whole, and Seattle would be very successful. I don't think I feel like it's misconstrued where it's like Sam Darnold has won now 2 straight seasons where he's won 13 plus games or whatever, and it's like okay, but I don't know if that's Darnold elevating so much as it is he's being put in fantastic situations on really good teams and he's just kind of not necessarily elevating, but he's kind of keeping the ship afloat, right? So it's like this idea of we're just trying to get a quarterback that can keep the ship afloat. That was the Daniel Jones Colts philosophy was Daniel Jones can come in and play some good ball and he's not going to, he's not going to ruin it for us and we can win with him. And then eventually it caught up to them and Daniel Jones got hurt obviously and that didn't help either, but like I don't like the idea of building a roster where the goal is let's have a really good roster and then a quarterback that can kind of just like, keep it together. Like
Mm-hmm.
and not like actually elevate it. Like look at the teams that are doing well largely is because of great quarterback play. Caleb Williams is having a great season and now the Bears are doing well. Matt Stafford is an MVP candidate and the Rams are doing great. Brock Purdy is having is unbelievable stretch of games these past few weeks and now the 49ers look like a really good team. Like we can't I hate just like let's just get a quarterback to keep it together and play good enough. Like if you're the most important position in football, you should have the goal of the quarterback should be the best player on the team, not
Yep.
just one part of it.
Could you imagine Josh Allen with the Colts skill players?
Yeah, I mean it would be.
Like that's an offense that would, I think, set records. I have loved Alec Pierce since he was in the draft. I've wanted
Yeah.
Buffalo to trade for him the last two trade deadlines, but
Mm-hmm.
they have. I think the the Colts drafting is a really good exhibit. Like when we're gonna have some podcasts kind of analyzing how different teams draft. The Colts and the Packers usually grade pretty high. The Colts draft almost as well as the Packers. Not quite, but they do pretty well.
Yeah.
So, um, but hey, we just kind of plowed through like 70 minutes worth of topics there. Um, you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find all of your other content.
Yeah. You can find me on X at Anthony underscore Russo 97. All sorts of NFL draft and college football and NFL football content stuff. I've got my Substack. You can find it on my X page in my bio. I've put out now. I just put out my early cornerback rankings. I also have my early offensive tackle rankings up, and I plan on doing probably one more position group this weekend to sort of, the goal is to get position groups out before the Senior Bowl to kind of set the stage for the class as a whole and where I stand on the class. But yeah, there's all sorts of, again, I post, clips and, takes and analysis and all that good stuff. So check me out there, and I'll be on, Draft Professor podcasts at someday during the week. I will be on Draft Professor podcasts, and as I said, at the top of the show, it is as good a time as any to start getting your NFL draft fill, because the end of the season is upon us, and NFL draft season is very much upon us.
Yeah. So this is Draft Professor. If this is the first podcast you've caught from us, thank you for stopping by. We're here every day, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern on weeknights, Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern, Sunday mornings. Right now we have a 9 Eastern and a 10:30 Eastern show. Some of the Sunday times are going to fluctuate as the NFL games on Sundays decrease. A lot of that's not really going to happen until February 15th, but some of that I think is going to begin to take shape, where we'll have a Sunday night podcast coming at you soon. So, what you're going to see on this channel, you will see live mock drafts. We actually had a mock draft earlier today, where we had 32 people drafting for the different teams, and we went for 3 rounds. And then we learn a lot from those mocks, because you begin to see who everybody values high. For example, Zion Young went in round 1 with the one that we did earlier today. So you can begin to see that some people have those players higher than others. And those are good discussion points. So we tend to learn something each time we do a mock. We try to bring different people on to do the mocks, so you're not seeing the same boards and the same picks from everybody. But that's kind of who we are. We have about 110 people at the Draft Professor, and you'll be able to catch about 30 of us on podcasts. So you'll see Anthony right now. Anthony's Friday and Saturday. And then right before the podcast, Anthony's like, well, maybe Sunday night sounds good. So the nights that people are on will change, but we're here. That's what we do. We love the draft. We podcast on it 12 months a year. And this is kind of like our time. So for Anthony, myself, for the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy your Friday night, and we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow morning. Really? Okay. So right now it's telling me I can't end the stream.
Nice. Well, that's one way to end the stream. Uh, let's see. Let's see when Jim gets back. Are we gonna take bets? Over under. Over under 30 seconds. What are we thinking? I guess in theory, couldn't I just, if I just leave the studio, does it end the show? I don't know. I would think it would. No, we're gonna do a top 100. No, we're not doing that. Let me. No, I see him. He's coming.